Welcome to the Darkstream, Voxday, voxday.net, and unauthorized.tv. So tonight I'm probably going to be a bit meandering, self-indulgent, and possibly even a little bit philosophical. And I'm probably going to say some things that are going to strike you as probably arrogant in some way, but that's okay. One thing I've found is that over time, these sort of rambling streams without any particular point often end up being more interesting and more worthwhile listening down the road than timely streams that address the issue of the day. And within 3 months, nobody cares where Russia happens to have its troops located. Nobody cares where the front line happened to move. There's a fundamental difference between that which lasts and is potentially of interest years later, decades later, whatever, and stuff that is just trivial, doesn't really matter. Doesn't matter much now, doesn't matter at all in a week. So it's kind of an interesting dichotomy when you think about it, that the more timely your subject is, the less significant it becomes over time. So anyhow, what got me thinking a bit, I was really busy today. I had to get up early, I had to run around, I had to drive somebody somewhere, I had to pick somebody else up somewhere. I will say, I have to say an early congratulations to my friend, the Pizza Maestro. He just got word of a major award, and I'm really looking forward to publishing his book, The Philosophy of Pizza. It's going to be a duolingual book in English and Italian, one edition, 2 languages. He's just an absolute maestro, an artist with the pizza, and it was fun getting to see him. We actually ended up having lunch at his place, and it's good to see him getting the kind of recognition that, frankly, most people who are really good at what they do never get. And it's fine. That's one thing that I think is difficult for most people to understand. Now sometimes when people say they don't care about rewards and that sort of thing, it's not entirely true. It may be largely true. But when you've got certain personality types, they respond well to recognition. They respond well to praise. John Scalzi desperately wanted to win Hugo Awards and Nebula Awards and that kind of stuff. Larry Correa, I suspect that there were times early on when he really wanted to. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's as far as I can tell, entirely normal. What's unusual is people who are genuinely indifferent to both praise and rewards. Now, I'm not going to pretend that I'm entirely indifferent to praise. I'm mostly indifferent to it, but not entirely. Rewards, on the other hand, you know, I didn't bother picking up my college diploma for more than 25 years, and I have no idea where it is. I think I picked up one of my college letters. I gave it to my grandmother. I have no idea where the other one is. You know, for me, you know, I won a lot of things from the time that I was very young. And so it was expected, you know, kind of in the way that you read about the Asian children of tiger moms, except for the fact that the children of tiger moms and so forth actually tend to care what their parents think. I didn't care what my parents thought either, you know, rightly or wrongly. You know, I didn't have the need for parental approval that, you know, say my brothers did. There are probably reasons for that. I'm not going to bother getting into it. And it doesn't have anything to do with, you know, having a problem with them or not liking them. You know, they're both likable people. You know, if you met them, you would like them. You know, so that, but for, you know, and if you think about it, it makes sense. If you're dealing with a mentality that literally forces itself to live by the mantra, most people are idiots, and whose biggest regrets are uniformly having listened to others rather than trusting themselves, you know, you're going to develop a fundamentally different mindset. You know, you know, I'm much more interested in real, genuine, substantive criticism, useful criticism, than I am in praise. Praise seldom does you any good. I mean, it might make you feel better. It might give you encouragement to continue when the spirit is flagging and you can't find the motivation to go on. Well, that's not a problem for me. You know, it's never been a problem. Also, and this is something that I think people are beginning to understand as the concept of the gamma becomes more familiar, you know, across a broader audience, is that you know, most of the problems with people that I have had, whether they're serious problems or, you know, petty annoyances, have come from people that claim to be fans, or not even claim to be fans, from people who are fans. I mean, there is no, there's nothing you can say. There's no terrible, awful criticism that you can articulate that is going to strike alarm bells in any quasi public figure, like, I'm your biggest fan. You know, it's not an accident that people who get stalked, people who get murdered, etc., especially if they're, you know, female celebrities, it's almost always a deranged fan type thing. And people just intrude upon your life in ways that you would not believe possible. You know, I'll give you an example. And just to be clear, I blame Owen for this. You know, I told Owen, I blame you for this. But anyhow, some bear, because of course it was a bear, watched the Trinity debate between Owen and some Orthodox bro. you may recall it was fairly controversial, etc., etc. So anyhow, I get a couple emails from this individual, and I'm not interested in busting on the person. We're dealing with I'm sure he's a very nice guy and he means well and all that sort of thing. But I'm using this as an example, a very recent example, very far from the only example, right? So anyhow, I get this thing. Vox, can you give me a call? It's urgent. And yeah, there was something about the way that it was written. There's more to it than that, but there's something that was, it wasn't indicative of crazy. It was more indicative of somebody who actually thinks he means it. I can't describe why I read it that way, but when you're an editor, when you read a lot and that sort of thing, you can pick up a lot of things from a fairly small amount of text. So anyhow, I was like, to be honest, I was kind of procrastinating on something that I actually needed to do. So I thought, well, this is urgent. I should call them. And he sent his phone number, so I call it up, and he's like, oh, thanks for calling, really appreciate it, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, okay, what's up? Okay, do you have a piece of paper? I'm like, excuse me? And this is when I know, okay, this is going awry. There's some level of off here. And I don't mean off in like the deranged sense at all. Let me give you another anecdote so that I can put into context what my read was, and I think you'll understand. Back when I was doing game development actively, I still dabble here and there, right? But back when I was a game developer and a game designer and a professional game reviewer all at the same time, I was friends with a vice president at a company called Creative Labs. We'd done some work with Creative Labs, gotten to be friends with this guy and his wife. They met Space Bunny. They like Space Bunny. So we were, good enough friends that when we would go out there, either for work or for vacation, visiting family or whatever, we would actually stay at this couple's house. We had some really good times with them. But I'll never forget when he said, he comes in and he puts his arm around, he goes, okay, I'm going to tell you something, but you can't tell anyone else. I'm looking in the other room. There's the two women. His wife, by the way, is this beautiful blonde. So you've got these two beautiful blondes sitting in the other room, chatting, drinking wine. I'm like, dude, why are you lowering your voice? Like, there is no chance that the women are listening to us. They have no interest when we're talking shop. None. So I was like, okay, why are we talking like this? He goes, I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to tell you about a game idea. It's a guaranteed hit. It can be a huge hit. I'm like, okay. He's like, but I'm going to need you, can you put me in touch with this guy from EA and this guy from GT Interactive? And I'm like, well, I know the one guy, and I'm friends with the one guy, and the other guy is my executive producer, so yeah, no problem. And the funny thing is, I did actually set up one of the meetings and apologize to the guy ahead of time, like, I'm sorry, but just hear him out. So he lowers his voice and says, Three Stooges fighting game. And then he sits back. Whoa. And he's looking at me like waiting for the expression, the whoa, mind blown, brilliant, massive. And I'm thinking, wow, you really are a previous generation of entertainment. Because I can't think of anything that would be less interesting to pretty much everybody my age and younger. And I'm about as old as a computer game player gets. You know, I mean, friends of mine who are even 1 year older didn't play computer games, didn't get into computer games. You know, I'm not saying nobody did. I'm just saying that in general, you know, I'm pretty much at the very edge of being really into games the way that everybody is now. So I tried to let him down as easy as I could. I mean, this is a friend of mine, you know. It's a terrible idea. But I said, well, you know, are you sure it hasn't been done before? He's like, oh, no, 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 I looked into it. And the funny thing is, somebody did eventually make a Three Stooges fighting game, and it was just terrible. You know, it was a blip on the radar that nobody picked up. um, Anyhow, that was the same feeling that I had when he said Three Stooges fighting game. It's exactly the feeling, the impression that I had as soon as the guy said, okay, draw a circle. And I don't know exactly what it was that I was reading, but I immediately knew we're dealing with a non-rocket scientist here. You know, if somebody starts explaining something to you and it involves a Venn diagram, you know, you're dealing with someone who's like maybe got 105 IQ, maybe. You know, if you have to draw pictures to keep that sort of complexity straight, you're just not very intelligent. I think that's what I was partially picking up. Anyhow, the big revelation, and this was described as a revelation, was that one of the apostles was actually Jesus's twin sister, and represented the female principle in the same way that Jesus Christ represented the male principle. And exactly, I couldn't see the guy's face because we were on the phone, but it became very, very, I mean, I knew that he was probably, that his facial expression was probably exactly that of my friends when he came up with when he told me about the idea concerning the Three Stooges fighting game. Anyhow, you know, I had to admit, I've heard lots of esoteric, occultic theories and heresies related to Jesus Christ. This was new to me. So I was actually kind of interested in how this had come to pass. So you can probably imagine what my first question was, which was, have you read much Jordan Peterson? Because of course, the concept of the female principle and the male principle, I mean, it's yin and yang, it's Kabbalah, it's all of these, you know, various esotericisms that in the crudest possible form are represented in every fantasy novel about the importance of maintaining the balance. You know, anytime you see someone talking about balance in a good versus evil concept, you are dealing with the lowest and dumbest and least educated form of esotericism, of occultism. You know, it is obviously evil in even its fairly light forms, not in its most retarded form. There, it's just you know, the sort of mouth breeder's esotericism, as it were. Venomous says, poor guy was convinced he had his eureka moment. Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, this is the difference between intellectuals and everyone else. If you want to know what's the fundamental difference between intellectuals and everyone else, it's that intellectuals have more than one idea. Intellectuals have ideas all the time. And we know that most of them are crap. But if you've never had an idea before, and give this guy credit, unlike the vast majority of human beings on the planet, he did come up with an original idea. That's why I was willing to talk to him for a bit, because it was clear this was new to me. Silent Draco said, she changed water into wine coolers. Well, that's exactly the direction that I went. Because I said, Chris Hawk says, retardery is a given. Exactly, because most people are idiots. But original retardery has to be appreciated for the novelty. I mean, I don't think that you probably quite grasp how totally tedious most communication is to me, because it's so repetitive. It's so the same thing over and over again. So anytime somebody says something stupid but original, you're like, oh, okay, well, at least this is interesting. So, because of course, this opens all kinds of massive theological doors. The implications are amazing. I said, so, okay, so with regards, he says, no, he hasn't read any of this stuff. Okay, fine, no problem. Which I asked, by the way, because I said, well, are you familiar with this? Are you familiar with that? He wasn't familiar with any of it. He hadn't read any of this stuff. So this is a genuinely original idea. Complimenti. But I said, have you thought through the implications? He's like, well, what do you mean? I said, well, if you're correct in this theory, then there must be implications. He said, well, I haven't thought about implications. It's just a fact. I'm like, that's one of those where do you start moments. Like, I don't even know where to begin. So I just said, no, implications. For example, if Jesus represents the masculine principle and his female twin represents the female principle, did she also die on the cross? Was she one of the two thieves? Did she die separately? Or alternatively, are women not saved because Jesus' sacrifice only sufficed for men and not for... I mean, there's tremendous, significant implications if this were to be the truth. And of course, he hadn't considered any implications. And he said, well, if it's not true, then how did I come up with this? Which was a good question. I said, well, you use the term revelation. I said, revelations are by definition something revealed to you. So someone, an entity, had to reveal it to you. I said, and you need to be aware of the possibility that if you had a genuine revelation, if something revealed it to you, it's possible that something was evil. He said, well, how do you know? I said, well, it's pretty simple. If you are a prophet, then you will probably receive other revelations, and if they come true, all of them, 100%, no misses, no failed interpretations, etc., then you can be confident of God. I said, but if you're wrong about even one, then you're a false prophet. All your revelations are false. All of them stem from evil sources. That's just, you might want to read a little bit about what God thinks of false prophets. And so, anyhow, what was funny was that, like all people who have, one idea, he was naturally somewhat defensive of it and that sort of thing. But anyhow, it was actually an interesting conversation. I didn't object to it at all. I could probably write an entire Dan Brown novel style story just based off that one idea. But of course, it gets weird. It's going to get weird. I mean, there was not a fragment of a splinter of a shadow of a doubt that I was going to hear from this guy soon. And so the next day, I get this email. Urgent, very important. I need to talk to Owen. I'm as best as I can figure. I think he figures that because I've made it clear. Look, I think you're wrong. I think you're flat out wrong. There's no evidence. There's not even a shred of evidence for what you're talking about. And the theological implications are so massive that it would completely destroy Christianity if this could be demonstrated beyond even if it became a reasonable possibility. And so, which is why I think that it's total, complete nonsense, right? But I was polite about it. Sam says, because you're Big Bear's secretary. Well, obviously, he thinks I'm easier to get a hold of because, he sent me an email, I gave him a call, Anyhow, and yeah, this is also a way of me explaining it's not going to happen again. I don't care if your fucking house is on fire, don't call me. If you call me because your house is on fire, you're out of luck because I still won't call you. Call the fire department, not me. So I just said, he said something like, if you don't believe this, whatever, and just send it on to Big Bear. And Sterling just said, it's good to know Vox is waiting at the phone for when I have an urgently retarded idea. Yeah. Here's the thing. As retarded as the idea was, it was actually interesting. It was actually better than like 99% of the retardery that most people produce. But that the original idea, I'm not talking about the subsequent behavior. But anyhow, so with Silent Draco says, this is wandering into Bob Newhart grade of comedy. Oh, just wait. There's more. So anyhow, he wants me to let Big Bear know, or he wants me to have Big Bear call him. That's what it was. Have Big Bear call him. And so I then said, no, I don't believe that you're correct. And I'm not going to pass your details on to Big Bear. If you want to get in touch with him, shoot him an email. And then I have to read this just because I can't summarize it reasonably, and I think it kind of has to be read in its entirety. It's not that long. It's not a huge wall of text. This guy's not a gamma. He strikes me as a delta, to be honest. See if I can find this. I get a ridiculous. I should look these things up before I try to do it, because I do get a ridiculous amount of email. Okay, here we go. So I found it. Okay. So I sent him an email saying, or he sends me an email saying, "Are you in? Or are you out?" I said, "I'm out. You can contact Owen directly. You know, you don't need to involve me." Owen is a big boy. He can discern for himself the validity of a message. I do have a follow-up download to share with you, but your ego doesn't want to hear. I thought you were a general in God's army, but you were actually the king of the gammas. Your dad made a lot of mistakes and caused a lot of hurt and embarrassment for you and your family. I would much rather go out for a couple of beers with your dad and tell war stories than waste my time with an uptight bookworm like yourself. Good day, sir. He actually good dayed me. That to me was the ultimate exclamation point to this whole thing. I said good day. Anyhow, that's the otter meme, obviously, for those of you who aren't familiar with my affinity with otters. But yeah, so if you're ever wondering why I won't call you, now you know. The Grey Man said he wants to go out with beers with your dad who caused embarrassment. Or did I mishear? No, he would rather go out with my dad, despite the hurt and embarrassment that he caused me, which was non-existent, of course. Then but the thing is, do you wonder why I don't give a flying fuck about praise from any of you? I mean, is this really confusing? You know, what possible difference could it make to me to get a pat on the head from people who are capable of coming up with that kind of stuff? Silent Draco sends a super chat. He says, "Trying not to laugh out of lung for the otters." Right. You know, and again, you know, I don't have any problem with this guy. You know, he didn't do anything wrong. I knew perfectly well when I called the number given that there was absolutely no chance that it didn't end up, you know, some sort of train wreck. You know, I mean, as it happened, we got both a original heresy and a pretty funny story out of it. So it's not a bad thing. It's probably, you know, among one of the best possible outcomes that you could have, right? Drop Bear says, even a sliver of fame seems to attract some strange folk. Yeah. You know, any amount of success in this day and age is going to draw strange people to you like moths to a flame. Chris Hawk says, Sigma Entertainment really is weird. Hey, you know, when you're not very social and you don't really like being around people very much, by definition, you have to produce your own entertainment. You know, I mean, I've always had a very high level of, you know, I've always had a very developed ability to entertain myself. You know, I have to admit, I did think it would be kind of funny at some point, you know, Yeah, I mean, obviously, I had thought about this because my dad really made lemonade out of lemons when he was in prison. He turned himself into a prison lawyer and did all this sort of thing. I had the feeling that I would probably just like sit there and write in my head and probably creep everybody out by just, sitting there in a near catatonic state for months at a time. Um, because that's pretty much how I live anyhow. Um, which is not fair to myself. I did go outside today once, um, because I had to, you know, drive someone somewhere and pick something up. But it's just it's just crazy the way that people try to influence others and impress others. I mean, seriously, what's the point? Is it the dopamine rush from the idea that another person has conveyed positive? Is it because the person? Here's the thing. Is the dopamine rush from the knowledge that the other person approves? Or is it from the conveyance of that approval to you? Like, for example, it must be from the conveyance of the approval, because otherwise you would derive just as much pleasure from the idea of their approval, whether they actually delivered it or not. So it can't be the actual approval that makes the difference to the approval seeker. It has to be the knowledge of it, which of course explains why awards matter to people seeking attention and people seeking approval, because they need that symbol. Because that's all these things are, is symbols of approval. And I think the more that you understand what the award represents, which is the approval, then obviously if approval doesn't matter to you, then what possible difference could the symbol of the approval matter? Chris Hawk says, for some it's about thinking they're being raised to a level they look up to. But see, the problem is, if you have any self-awareness, any ability to look objectively at what you've done, when I look at our Castalia library books, here, let me show you the latest. We just got these pictures here. Actually, somebody got their, is this it? I think this is it. Somebody got their Thucydides today. So shout out to the Castalia shipping. I can't believe that people are already getting them. Like, but see, that's an example of listening to criticism. Our subscribers said, guys, your shipping, your delivery sucks. It's terrible. We lost, I think at one point, 20% of our subscribers back when BindTech wasn't shipping anything. Right? And so we improved it a little bit, but it still sucked. And then fortunately we landed on the team we have now, and they're crushing it. I mean, it's at the point where we actually provide better shipping and delivery than bigger companies that are our theoretical competitors. The Gray Man sends a super chat, thank you, and he says they envy the credentials, status, items, awards that others have. Well, they do. Obviously, they envy them in some way, but I don't really see how. I mean, I think that they believe it conveys something that it doesn't convey because it's a category error. Winning an award does not make you a better author at all. It may not even, in Japan, obviously, it helps you sell books. The Hugo, the Nebula, you don't sell any more books because of that. You know, it just doesn't work that way. Tolkien wasn't winning anything. You know, Umberto Eco probably won a few prizes in Italy, but he didn't win much that I recall. Who cares? I would much rather write a book like Foucault's Pendulum than any of the books that won most of these awards, with the possible exception of Dune. Chris Hawk says, if there's one thing we know, most people think the award confers the ability. Well, sure, but most people are idiots. You know? To be honest, one reason why I may not care about awards is because, you know, when Star Wars didn't win, when I was a kid, I firmly believed that Star Wars was the greatest movie that had ever been made, that ever would be made. And when that's the only time I ever cared about the Oscars. It was when Star Wars was nominated and did not win the award for Best Picture. After that, no. You know, Star Wars didn't win. Therefore, the Oscars were obviously wrong. Now, of course, we know that they're fake and gay, but you know, at the time I was 7, I think. So, Sam Freeman says he went from approval seeking to rejection spurting in one interaction, father-son trauma. Well, I did think it was a little odd that he brought my dad up. You know, and this is something we've talked about before. I've written about it on Sigma Game, and I'll underline it now. Be very, very careful when you are angry and you are acting out, attempting to criticize or attempting to hurt another individual. What you're telling them in those situations most of the time is you're telling them what's wrong with you. You know, that's why I prefer to keep my general contempt. That's why I prefer to keep my contempt general. And in the event that I am going to direct any negativity or criticism towards people, I attempt to direct it specifically at their actions rather than their hypothetical motivations, etc., etc. Because what you're doing when you're attacking someone else's motivation, when you're attacking someone else's attention, then what you're really doing is you're revealing your own thinking. You're exposing yourself. It's just like martial arts. You know, when we were trained in our fighting style, it was all based on windows, opening and closing windows. And one thing that we were taught is that when you attack an opponent's window, you always open a window of your own. And vice versa. When they attack, they are vulnerable. Simultaneous offense, defense. That's why I kind of laughed when they had that in Top Gun Maverick, and they were playing a football game of simultaneous offense, defense. It reminded me immediately of the conceptual, some of the conceptual aspects of my martial arts training. But this is not the other book I meant to bring up. The other one I was going to bring up is, let's see here, got to go into the other side. And, oops, wrong one. There we are. Yeah, so this This is, I should turn this one off first. This is Pride and Prejudice. It's our version of the Peacock edition. It's got the cover is very similar to the original first edition, but the spine is all our design, but it incorporates some elements and so forth. Now, I don't need anybody to tell me that these books are beautiful. They are beautiful. Are they perfect? No. We analyze these things closely, and there are specific elements. I'm not going to go into them, but there are specific elements that I believe that we can continue to improve. I think that we can improve a number of different elements and hopefully hit heights that nobody else is capable of hitting now. But praise doesn't mean anything. Awards don't mean anything. Just as an exercise, largely to confirm my suspicions about these sort of things, we sent a copy of Heidi in to this competition for the most beautiful books in Switzerland. And it wasn't one of the 25 winners or even honorable mentions, despite the fact that if you look at the list of winners, there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that that one was the one that we produced was the most beautiful. There were one or two maybe other books that you might have gone, okay, well that would be who would be in the running. But it just didn't compare. It wasn't even close. It's the same way when you write. I do listen to substantive criticism. One of the reasons that we don't have the A Sea of Skulls print edition out yet is somebody wrote to me and they said, I think you made a mistake with regards to some geographical placement of something. So I just said, okay, I'm going to see if I can figure that one out. And we'll put it out when I get that taken care of. It doesn't affect the book at all. But before we get the ebook editions, you can always download a new one. Print, once you go to print, there you are. So I want to at least see if I did make a mistake or not before we put it out. Another example, there was a big review, a very positive review about A Throne of Bones when I first published A Throne of Bones. And one of the criticisms, and a good one, substantive one, was that it lacked a sense of the numinous, and that there were no like Tolkien type songs and that sort of thing. So guess what we got in A Sea of Skulls? Couldn't do much about the numinous because that's something either you have or you don't. But I think that everyone, the song thing, I was like, I'm a lyricist. I'm a, Billboard top 40 recording artist. I can write lyrics. And so I did. And I think that you would agree that at least two of the songs are pretty unforgettable. I don't know how Throw the Dwarf in the Cook Pot stands against Where There's a Whip, There's a Will, or Where There's a Whip, There's a Way. I don't remember which is correct, but I think that it's in the conversation. That's why criticism is useful. Criticism, when it's substantive and when it's correct, it's much more useful than people patting you on the head. Good job. And I'm not intending to minimize it or to denigrate it for those who need it. I'm just saying that not everybody needs it. Because what people gain from it is emotional, and not everybody requires emotional support from others to do what they do. You know, I mean, like the Gamma stalkers, they don't need any praise. They're going to hate people just fine on their own. You know, that's what they do. And for somebody who's a genuine writer, you don't need praise to write. It's just what you do. You do it because you enjoy it. You do it because it makes you feel good. You do it because you have some sort of burning need to. Mickey W says, haha, I much prefer a pat on the head. Yeah, that's fine. I suspect that there's more people like that than don't, because for some reason, I don't know why, a lot of people like to feign indifference when they don't actually feel indifference. And that I really don't understand. If you care, you care. And people will always see through you over time. Eventually, you're going to crack. So why not just be open about how you feel in the first place? I mean, what are you afraid of? That you might admit to not liking failure? Well, there's a revelation. Who does? Nobody does. But everybody does fail from time to time. Doesn't mean we like it. Sam Freeman says, fine line between appreciation and praise, delta appreciation, alpha praise. I don't really follow that. To me, appreciation is that you enjoy it. Praise is that you tell people that you enjoy it. And there's nothing wrong with telling people that you enjoy things. I think it's good. I think it's positive. I think that we should do that more often because a lot of people need it. A lot of people find it fulfilling. A lot of people get sad if they do something and they don't get that. But, there's reasons why, and there's no need to go into the psychological scars or traumas or whatever that causes you, but that causes certain mindsets, but that's okay. Paulo De Sale says, tried to pay up with new sub payment system down. Yeah, the payment system for unauthorized is still down. We should have a new one in place hopefully next week, but we'll see. We're working on it, making progress. Just one thing, The Gray Man says, well done, my good and faithful servant. Yeah, that's I would very much like to hear that from God someday. But, other than that, the thing is, as you get older, the more you realize you can't even remember what you did, much less what anybody said about it. There are certain things that, there are certain comments and certain things you'll probably take to your grave, usually negative or sometimes funny. But, I would struggle to remember any details from the Eternal Warriors novels. I have no idea really what most people said about those books at all, except for one thing that did stick with me was this editor at Pocket Books, who was one of Stephen King's assistant editors, said that The World in Shadow, she found The World in Shadow scarier than anything Stephen King had ever written. So I thought that was interesting. I'm not sure it was a compliment. I took it as a compliment, but she didn't really say it in a way that was complimentary. But Anyhow, I didn't get around to the point that I was going to get to, but so I'll just give you a little. If you want to go to Sigma Gaming, you can see it. But basically, I think in much the same way that I improved upon Ian Fletcher's critique of free trade and the Austrian economist's mechanism for the business cycle, I think that I actually may have managed to, I don't think it's improving on what Aristotle said, but I think that Aristotle didn't really follow through on the way that the implications, not the implications, not, yeah, the implications of his distinction between rhetoric and dialectic. Because it occurred to me that the issue is not that people can't be instructed. The issue is not in the instruction. It's not instruction that they're immune to. It's knowledge that they're immune to. I mean, if it's supposed to be the instruction that they cannot benefit from, then the problem would have to be in the transmission from the instructor to the instructee. But at no point does Aristotle ever suggest that. And from our own observations, we see that people cannot learn from their own experiences either. They continue to make the same mistakes over and over again, even though they have acquired this knowledge on their own without instruction. And so it's clear that in addition to being unable to learn through instruction, they're just unable to apply knowledge. So I'm not sure of all of the implications of this, and I'm not sure of the significance yet because I haven't spent any time whatsoever thinking through it. It was just that when I was describing the way in which the gamma inability to learn from their behavioral failures connects to Aristotle's distinction between rhetoric and dialectic, I realized that number one, it's not limited to gammas, and number two, it is not an issue related to instruction at all. You know, that rhetorical application is just a subset, which if you've ever read any Aristotle, you would realize how fitting that is. Hawk says, does the best rhetoric cut past that obstacle? Yeah, that's the whole point. That's why he's saying that you cannot instruct them, you cannot get them to change their minds, you cannot convince them with dialectic, you cannot convince them with knowledge, you have to manipulate their emotions with rhetoric. Which takes us back to the point of why would anyone value what those people who are immune to knowledge and who speak, who are limited to the rhetoric, why would you care what they think? Why would it make any difference? Kiyosaki Bear and Narnia Bear says, sounds like NPCs. It does indeed. Aristotle essentially defined the NPC back in 2500 BC, or 500 BC. 2,500 years ago in 500 BC. The Gray Man says, the rhetoric dialectic from the past decade was a gigantic game changer. It really is. It really is. And most people just don't notice. They just don't realize it. They have no idea how important that can be. When even reality affecting them often doesn't make a difference, why does rhetoric get through? Because reality doesn't affect their emotions. Rhetoric affects their emotions, and that's how they're manipulated. Different people are primarily motivated by different emotions. Some people are fear motivated, Some people are approval seeking, motivated. And so the rhetorical master has to know what the target's motivation is and press the button to trigger it. And that's why, that's why I said it's so dangerous, especially if you're angry, especially if your temperature has risen. I mean, here's a suggestion for all of you. If you can feel your emotional temperature having risen, if your voice is if you're starting to speak a little louder and you're starting to raise your voice, do not use the word you. Do not say one single thing about the other person, because all you're going to do is hand over the keys to your emotional triggers to them. It's harmless in most cases because most people are not rhetorical masters. You do that to Owen and he will play you like a freaking organ anytime he wants. You do it to me, you're essentially just handing me a scalpel along with a map to your skull. So, in any event, Mickey W says, is this why it's good to call white women mud sharks? Shame is emotional. Well, good is the wrong word. That's why it is rhetorically effective. If you were to address a woman as a mud shark, there's a very good chance that she would start crying. It's rhetorically effective because, as Aristotle points out, the best rhetoric points to the truth. It may actually be dialectically false, but the emotional, there is no actual information content in rhetoric. That's why rhetoric can affect those who are immune to information, who are, there's no actual knowledge. And the gray man's correct. The whole issue over Christ and Christ as King is rhetorical. Christ as King triggers the satanic people who reject the divinity of Jesus Christ. Which, again, think about that. What does it tell you that they're affected by it? What do their attacks and response tell you about them? Every single time you attack someone else, you are opening a window into your psychology. I mean, look at me. What do you learn from when I demonstrate open contempt for another party? What do you learn about me just from that? When I say, look, most people are idiots. What do you learn anything about me? Of course you do. It's the same with anything else. Now, I don't mind. The best rhetoric points to the truth. But anyhow, on that note, that's all I've got tonight. Thanks to everybody who jumped in, especially the non-subscribers who jumped in and picked up copies of Pride and Prejudice. What's great about that is there's a lot of interest in this book, even from people who don't subscribe to Castelli Library and so forth. And so we actually printed up an extra 250 of them. And it's going to be, I don't know how quickly they'll sell out, but, we're going to let some of the some of the societies and stuff that are big into Jane Austen and Pride and Prejudice know about this. And so I think you'll, if you have any interest in the books, I'd encourage you to pick up a copy. It's really beautiful, and I think you'll like it. So on that note, I wish you all a good evening. I'm Vox Day, and this is the Darkstream.